And we are here with producer, filmmaker, consultant Anjay Nagpal. He's also the executive director of the Indian Film Festival, Los Angeles. You'll know some of his films like Greyhound and Monkey Man and The Green Knight and Kicks, which I think is the poster behind you that we had the pleasure of working on when I was at Picture Motion. So hi, Anjay. Thank you for being here.
Hey, it's great to be here. And, I'm excited to talk about independent film today.
Independent film feels like it's never been more independent or isolated. I want to talk about your career history for a minute because you've done financing, executive producing. You've worked for big companies like Sony. You've worked with Focus World, which I want to understand more about how that worked. You've worked with Braun. Can you just tell us a little bit about your career history in the film industry?
Yeah, sure. I think one of the things I've done is straddle the independent and studio world. So even when I worked within studios, which is Sony Pictures, and Focus Features, which is part of NBC Universal, it's been in the divisions that work in independent films. So at Sony, the acquisitions group, and then within Focus, I ran a division called Focus World. So it's kind of always been at that intersection. And my origins are more, I was a finance, undergrad, had a career as a derivatives trader for a few years and had a quarter life crisis in my early 20s and decided that I wanted to get into entertainment and film and started out more on finance, deal analysis, distribution, and then over time got into the kind of creative side of things as well, spearheading development, acquisitions, and production for financiers and production companies.
So then from being from the finance perspective, so you've been saying, know how films have previously been packaged, and I'm sure you've seen a transition in how films are packaged over the last probably 10, 15 years and to how indie filmmakers are packaging them now. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Some things stay the same. Some things change a lot. There's kind of certain things that are tried and true and formulas that still work. But I think the things that fit into that bullseye now are more few and far between. They're harder to get greenlit. So yeah, things have changed.
Yeah. So let's talk about one of your roles, whether it was Sony or it was Focus World or Braun. What did film financing, keep it high level, what did it look like back then, not that long ago? How are you financing these films?
Well, I think at Sony and Focus, a lot of the time what we did was we acquired films that were being produced by independent producers, independent financiers, and then we would acquire those things for distribution. And those films typically were financed independently, either from, high net worths or big financiers that are in the space. They're packaged with talent and filmmakers. They go, offset a portion of their budget from local tax incentives and another big portion of their budget from international sales. And then whatever is not covered out of the budget at that point is, what they call the domestic gap, which is what they need to get from the domestic market to kind of break even or reach a profit.
The domestic market seems to be struggling right now. I think many of the films that we work with at Kinema are documentary films. And there was a big surge in demand for documentaries from the different streaming platforms. And now there's a big pullback from it. To my understanding, most of your films have been scripted or narrative films. Are you seeing something similar, or what changes have you seen in the market in the last couple of years?
Great question. And absolutely, I think we've seen a pullback in the documentary world. And I own some podcast IP and for podcasts that I produce. And some of them are these kind of like big, fun, true stories about, larger than life FBI investigations and things like that. And unless they're super contemporary and unless they're super, of the moment, those things are not selling nearly as much as they were. So kind of like the bullseye for unscripted content has gotten a lot smaller. Things that, during the pandemic might have sold, true crime adjacent stories, very hard to sell in today's market, especially, like I said, if you have a story that's, took place in the 80s or 90s, those things are much harder to get greenlit today.
I think maybe 2 years ago, when we were trending Survive till 2025, we were looking on the doc side of what was getting acquired. And if it was okay, if you can make a celebrity or sports or true crime, then you can kind of get in that streaming door. And so now what you're seeing is that even if it's true crime, it's got to be very contemporary true crime.
Yeah, it's more celebrity in sports now. Of course, there's still some true crime that gets greenlit, but not nearly as much as there used to be.
And so when you're looking at, on the podcast side, you're working with a company or with a studio, you're producing some podcasts, but they were doing it for the IP. And then you would take that IP and then you're looking to make it into a video doc series or a feature film. What was that looking like?
Yeah. I'll just give like a little bit of background on that because, it was an interesting series of events. So it all comes back to the pandemic. And in 2020, had left Prawn Studios and had a light in hand to go produce Monkey Man with Deb Gazelle. Obviously, things changed, and that didn't happen, or at least didn't happen for another year and a half. And so in the meantime, I started a podcast company, and the goal was exactly what you said, which is, create IP, own that IP, and try to tell those stories on film or, scripted or unscripted versions, regardless, right?
I've heard there's another company out there that's doing this with news articles, like same thing, like trying to find news stories that they can turn to IP, going into different companies to pull out stories. It seems IP is like the next round of what people are looking for. Again, you have such an interesting career history, and I'll get to the film festival in a second, but Focus World. I remember Kicks, and I thought Kicks was a Focus film. I loved that film. We got to do some impact work for it. I believe it was an emerging first-time director, but it was technically Focus World. Is that correct? What was Focus World, and what was your role there?
Focus World was an offshoot of Focus Features, and we concentrated more on multi-platform distribution at the time. So the big player in that space at the time was Radius, which was part of the Weinstein Company, run by two people. One of them's name's Tom Quinn, who runs Neon right now,
and Jason Janego at the time. We worked closely with them,
and then they're wonderful, and they had a great company, and I thought we should challenge what they're doing. We have the might of a studio behind us, and so let's experiment with Windows and see if we can have some success in day and date releasing. Not to get too far off tangent, but not coming from Hollywood originally or from the studio system originally, I always have been interested in trying to do things different ways. Mm-hmm. Multi-platform, releasing, meaning either day and date or, short windows, or A24 actually pioneered the pre-theatrical VOD release. Those were kind of different models that we were playing with. And I was able to be a part of some amazing films, worked with some fantastic filmmakers. So Kicks, that you just talked about, is Justin Tipping's film, and Justin just directed him for Jordan Peele, incredibly talented filmmaker. He, at the time, had one short film that won some awards and just was really, a really impactful short film. But then to me, it's always been like, when I think about what to greenlight, it's like you can fall in love with the script, but I just need to hear from the filmmaker exactly how they're going to execute something. And like when they just have that passion and they know all the detail of exactly what they want to do, that's when I, get excited about working with filmmaker. And Justin was exactly that. He knew exactly what he wanted to do. He had an amazing script, an amazing cast, and he's from the Bay Area. And it's a very, even the soundtrack, it's like, it's all very authentic to that time and place. And it's just a great film.
Yeah, it's about sneaker culture as well. So you were tapping into a few different, I guess, core audiences there. We talk to filmmakers all the time. Like, is it going to compromise my release? Is it going to compromise my theatrical if the film's available online at the same time? Is it going to compromise getting a distribution deal if I've done a couple screenings ahead of time? So given from your perspective and doing those types of campaigns at Focus World or any other campaigns you've run for all of your films, what is your opinion on that? Like, do you believe in the day and date to be in theaters and online at the same time? Does that work? What do you think a preferred windowing strategy would be?
It depends on the film. First and foremost, you really need to kind of try to understand who your audience is, where they are, how you're going to reach them, and then tailor the campaign and the release strategy to the audience. That being said, like as a blanket response, I would say that it does not cannibalize the audience to have the film on VOD and in theaters at the same time. Where there's an audience that, has a niche that they are passionate about, they want to go to the theater to support that niche. And I think the word niche is an important one in all this, because niche used to mean like small or irrelevant. But I think we've learned in this world today that like niches can be big and valuable. And quite frankly, like, theatrically, you're never going to hit all of your audience. But if someone can access something digitally, then, you've got another customer there. So I'm definitely of the camp that there's no cannibalization or very little cannibalization for day and date for independent films specifically.
Interesting. For me, I always feel like if you think you have an audience that is willing to leave their house, like to go to a movie theater, then like you should like carve out a theatrical or non-theatrical window to tap into that office. And you might not, right? Like, so the example I'll give is like last night, I went and saw Project Hail Mary. That's normally not my typical type of film that I would go see. So I would have waited for VOD. My husband loved the book. And so he was like ready to go. And if that had been on day and date release, like I probably would have convinced him to stay at home and watch it. But instead, they got both my money at the movie theater for myself and my husband and 4 friends. And so that's a lot more ticket sales than we would have had if we just watched it back at home. So in that case, like there is an audience that really wanted to see it in theaters. And because it wasn't at home, they were able to get those extra dollars. But that probably doesn't apply to every single film.
Yeah. So again, it all depends, right? It depends on what your film is and who the audience is and things like that. So one thing I would say is like, again, if you're of age where you have kids and it's just so hard to get to the theater anyway, but if you're kind of, a young hip person in a major metropolitan area, you want to go out and see that movie and hang out with your friends, and talk about it before or after. But then just kind of going back to that, one thing actually that I think is most important is being able to have flexibility. And so one thing that we did at Focus World quite a bit was really just kind of play around with those windows and try to see what lessons we could learn. So for Cop Car, which is John Watts' film, who obviously went on to do some big things, we did a short theatrical window. I believe we had a 2-week theatrical release. And because we had a short exclusive theatrical, and because we had Kevin Bacon in the film doing a lot of press, we were able to secure some really good theaters and did really well theatrically. And then when the film hit VOD, I do believe there was an uplift because of those 2 weeks of press and publicity and all the marketing that we were doing. And that film knocked it out of the park on those digital platforms. So for that film specifically, having that little 2-week theatrical window really worked well. But again, as you know, if you're going to have that short window, a lot of the time the theaters that you want won't book your film. So there's a lot of complications and nuances in this process. But again, it's like you really want to look at each film individually and try to build that bespoke campaign and find out what the right windowing strategy is.
Yep, that makes sense. A couple questions on packaging. So when you were looking from, but I think we're talking a lot about like your past because you have an incredible career history. And I will get to the present and future with the festivals. But I'm curious, based on what you've experienced in putting together a film and what you're seeing happening right now with the distribution offers and acquisition offers, what is something that filmmakers should be looking at when it comes to packaging a film? Let's assume a scripted film. Like, is it what really moves the needle on not just getting financing, but hopefully getting attention and maybe getting some sort of sale and acquisition? Besides being a good film, is it the talent? Is it the director? Is it the style? Does it have to be under 90 minutes? What are the important things to think about when packaging?
Yeah, it's challenging. I mean, I think a few things, and I don't want to be too doom and gloom here, but I think the biggest problem that people are facing right now is that the domestic distribution landscape is just very difficult. As much as possible, yeah, you want talent, right? Yes, you want filmmakers. And for me, I've always been filmmaker driven. I find that when you work with writer directors or filmmaker driven projects, it's easier to cast. I think that's different when you're on the studio level, where, talent can come in at any time. But when you're in an independent film and you're trying to get that big cast, you want to have a filmmaker that talent knows and wants to work with. But I think packaging, you have to look at both the creative and kind of the, your financial responsibility. It's like, how can you get that budget down? Where are you shooting? And also, does it have any international value? And doing the exercise of, sometimes it does make sense to fully finance a film and leave all options on the table. Whereas otherwise it's like, no, we should really risk mitigate this as much as possible before we go into production. So I know I didn't really answer your question, but I think, A-list stars are always valuable. So if you can get them, go for it, right? I just think in today's world, talent that take, swings on independent films, they typically fall in love with the filmmakers. And so that's some of the thing that drives me.
I mean, look, it's not a film, but I still think it's cinema. Heated rivalry, 2 unknown stars. Like, they're cast completely unknown, and now they're superstars. And I got a lot of attention for the series. I just like to bring up heated rivalry as much as I can, just so you know.
It's a great success story, right?
It is. It gives hope to actors too, like who haven't booked something in a bit, that like there's still a chance to be discovered. It is very much a Cinderella story.
So one more thing I just to add to that is like, you said it has to be good, right? Obviously, but I think it's a simple statement, but it's so true because still today, so much of what you see is derivative, right? And that just doesn't work. I think that just doesn't work in the way that it used to. So things that are working that don't have massive casts are typically like something like you've never seen before. And it's easier said than done, but that really does still have value.
It is hard. It's a miracle. Someone said, like, it's a miracle a movie gets made. It's a miracle even more so if it's good. So speaking of good, so you run the Indian Film Festival of Los Angeles, IFLA. Did you get that right?
Yeah,
IFLA, cool.
that's right.
Tell us about the festival and how do you guys curate? And I want to hear, are things getting picked up at festivals?
So IFLA has been around it's on its 24th year now. So it has a long history in LA. It was at ArcLight Hollywood for a long time. It's one of the first festivals I ever went to and one of the ones I've been to the most over the last 20 years. It is a small and highly curated festival of South Asian films. The selection is by invite only, and it's typically 8 to 10 films in the official selection, and then 2 or 3 shorts programs, depending on the year. So it's compact because we have a really, really high quality bar. Why I joined is honestly promoting the culture and cultural kind of relevance of South Asian filmmakers and content to U.S. audiences. I think there's a huge thirst for, Indian and South Asian stories from Western audiences, but they haven't really been kind of fed the right content. So Bollywood, for example, is inaccessible to a lot of kind of Western audiences. And I put myself in that category. I'm half Indian, but I grew up in the States and always wanted to kind of explore content more. But the traditional Bollywood song and dance thing, while it's, an incredible art form, just didn't resonate with me personally. So I think there's, a great hunger for stories from the East, and IFLA, has the big part in kind of bridging that. And IFLA has also launched plenty of really successful filmmakers. People have gone on to, win Academy Awards, produce, direct, write massive films and TV shows for the biggest streamers in the world, the Amazons and Netflixes. So it's kind of been at that intersection of promoting South Asian, both their independent cinema, but also bringing this talent to like a larger stage.
I did not realize it's been around for 24 years. That's incredible. It was there when I was living in LA, and I used to go to the ArcLight. May she rest in peace. Do you see this festival as, is it a marketing launch pad? Is it a festival? Is it a buyer's festival? Or is it really for community? Is it help discovery, audience discovery? Where does it kind of sit in the different types of festivals?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I wish it was a huge acquisition festival, but there's not really such a thing as a huge acquisition festival anymore, except for Sundance, Cannes, and Toronto. And even those now are, right? So, while there have been films that got inquired out of there successfully, it's 2 things. It's really audience and community focused for sure. That is what the official selection is all about. We really want, people from the community to come out and kind of just watch the best of South Asian cinema. That being said, there's also a kind of really wonderful and growing industry section as well. We have a 2-day program that consists of like one-on-one meetings. There's actually a pitch competition from which we literally got hundreds of submissions and called it down to 5 that'll be pitching and will be given a grant for development. And there's panels and master classes and things like that, the happy hour. And so that's where kind of all the filmmakers, actors, writers come out and really kind of get involved. So there's like grassroots filmmaker-y LA community that's South Asian, but also beyond, to be honest with you. That's really fun. And that's kind of like the heart and soul of the festival. And so I think it's kind of 2-pronged, and it's a lot in 4 days, but it really does take kind of both of those audiences, and then because you do have your families that come from Orange County for a screening of kind of like a more commercial, Bollywood film that they can't see elsewhere, or, that we're premiering in North America. So you kind of have both audiences, which I think is what makes it really unique.
Oh, very cool. I think someone from our team is going to be there, either Rish or Ami.
Yeah.
They're both, Rish is here, but Ami's in Los Angeles. So I think they're going to participate in the industry days, which I'm excited for. When's the festival and how can people find out about it?
So it's April 23rd through 26th, and it's typically around the end of April. And people can find out about it on our website, which is indianfilmfestival.org. as well as our social media, which you can look up Indian Film Festival of Los Angeles and just, you'll be able to find it. Tickets went on sale last week and patents went on sale last week. And yeah, in the show notes as well.
Great. Okay. So you've seen a lot, you've experienced a lot. You've been through the ups and downs of the film financing and distribution space. For filmmakers who are entering the market today, they're making their first film, whether they're trying to break into the studio system, they're raising independently, they're building a following on YouTube, wherever they're coming from. What is your advice for up and coming and emerging? Let's go specific to film directors today.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think a lot of the tried and true things that we've talked about over the years still do apply, but I think you kind of need to broaden your kind of thought process a little bit. And there's a few things that today you have to think about that, in the past, maybe you didn't. But first and foremost is like, the more you know your audience, the better. So if you are making a, targeted film where, I know this is a South Asian genre movie and I know how to find that, specific audience these days, then great. But then there's a couple other things to think about. So for example, brand funding is something that the big studios have done for a long time. More and more, there are independent films that are receiving brand money for different reasons. And it's a really interesting kind of place to be right now in that world, brand money being put into all sorts of different projects. I've been at the brand storytelling conference at the Sundance Institute, and the open-mindedness of brands, if you can get to the right people.
I was going to say, how do you break in?
Yeah, that's the hard part. I have a whole nother show about that. But, there are more and more brands looking for independent projects. And actually, we were talking about documentaries a little bit ago. Documentaries, if you have the right subject matter, is something that, you can get brand funding for. And then the last thing I think that filmmakers need to think about today, if you're making an independent film, is marketing and P&A. I know a few, really successful indie filmmakers who, when they're raising money for their film, they add a few $100,000 extra for marketing expenses. That might be for self-release, or it might be just to hire, a company like yours or several others that they can use for certain parts of maybe it's grassroots marketing. But I think just thinking about how you're going to release a film, is it something you want to self-release? And should you be thinking about that early on, in your filmmaking process? I think the answer is yes.
Oh, it's definitely yes. Yes. I think we've said anywhere from like 20% to 50% to 100% of whatever your production budget is what your marketing and distribution budget should be. Because Brian Newman said once in his newsletter, it's like, we're the only business or industry in the world where we go to finance a business and we just don't care about the marketing. We're like, well, here's the whole product. We have no plan to market it in case it doesn't get swept up by a big buyer. So thank you for that advice. Everyone, please include dollars in your budget for marketing and distribution. Anjay Nagpal, anything else you want to share with filmmakers and industry friends listening?
Yeah, I think that everyone kind of really needs to take a hard look at distribution and the methods with which we are getting films out there and with which distributors are getting films out there. And I think there needs to be a big evolution in that space. You said a word before we started this podcast, which was content marketing. And that is something that I think is going to be where the change comes from. And we can do a whole separate episode on that. Both individual marketers and then need to do this. And then there will be soon dedicated platforms mostly on YouTube that are creating content and tools for marketing films.
Yes, agree. And I think I was going to say what this podcast is more content marketing versus journalism. For those who've listened, you'll know I am not a journalist. I would not try and propose to be one. So this is not the most hard hitting when I try not to scare my guests when they come on. But the intention is to meet other people in the industry and highlight the cool stuff that they're doing. But also it's a way for us to help provide some education and awareness for filmmakers who are working with us. So that's why I called this content marketing. Which essentially, raising awareness for what we're doing at Kinema while also hopefully providing some cool tools and education. So, but yes, let's do a whole podcast on content marketing because I could learn a few things.
And you're doing a great job. Thanks for having me on. The show is a lot of fun. I hope everyone listens to all the episodes because they're very relevant to what filmmakers are doing. And you just have to educate yourself these days. You can't make a film show up and, trust that somebody's going to step out of the woodwork, acquire the film, give your investors their money back, and do a great job getting the film into the hands of the audience.
This is so true. Yep. Well, Anjay, thank you so much. And everyone check out the Indian Film Festival, Los Angeles. And thank you.
Of course, take care.
And that's our episode. Thank you to our special guest, our producer and editor, Ron Pissarro, and you, the filmmakers, creators, marketers, and distributors that are dedicated to connecting audiences with great films.